There are events in my life that I prefer to forget, but this one haunts me to this day. It was the scorching summer of 1849, and I, Sam Houston, had just returned to Texas after a brief passage in Washington. I was tired of federal politics and eager to reconnect with the land that had helped turn into a republic. It was then that I received an urgent letter from Colonel Matthew Caldwell, an old Texas Independence War companion. Your message was brief and disturbing. Sam, I need you in Fort Phantom. Something terrible happened here. I don't trust anyone else to investigate. Come prepared for the impossible. Fort Phantom was in the west of Texas, a fortification built 2 years earlier to protect settlers from Apache attacks. It was a remote, isolated post known for its difficult conditions and the low morality between the troops parked there. But what Caldwell described in his letter went beyond the usual difficulties of military life on the border. I left immediately, taking only my horse, basic supplies, and 2 Colt pistols, not because I expected conventional combat, but because I learned over the years that even the supernatural sometimes respects steel and gunpowder. The trip lasted 5 days under a merciless sun. As I approached Fort Phantom, I noticed something strange: silence. There was no habitual singing of birds, nor the tinnitus of insects. Only the sound of the hot wind blowing through the dry vegetation. When I finally spotted the fort on the horizon, I immediately understood that something was deeply wrong. Fort Phantom, who was supposed to house a garrison of 80 men, was covered by a black cloud. As I approached me, I realized with horror that it was not a cloud, but thousands of crows. They were everywhere, on the roofs, on the walls, on the flagpoles, covering the floor of the courtyard. His grenades created an infernal cacophony that made my horse nervously reconnect. But the most disturbing was his behavior. They moved in coordinated standards, as if they obey an invisible command. I found Caldwell outside the walls, camped under a solitary tree. He had aged 10 years since our last date, his back and haunted eyes. Sam, he said, getting up to greet me. Thank God you came. I don't know what else to do. What happened here, Matthew? Where are men? He looked at the fort, his face writhing in an expression of pain. Missing. All 80. 3 weeks ago, I received a routine report from Captain Reynolds. All normal. 2 weeks later, a fur hunter went by and found the forte exactly as you see now, abandoned except by the crows. No sign of struggle? Blood? Bodies? Nothing. It's like they simply evaporated. They left everything behind: weapons, supplies, personal belongings. Even the food was still at the dining room tables, rotting. I observed the crows more closely. There was something unnatural in his eyes, a disturbing, almost human intelligence. When did the crows arrive? I asked. This is the mystery. The hunter swears they were already here when he arrived. But no one has ever seen so many crows in this region. And they... Caldwell hesitated. They don't behave like normal birds. Like this? See yourself. He took a stone and shot her toward the fort. Instantly, hundreds of crows raised flight in perfect formation, creating complex patterns in the air before landing again, exactly the same positions as before. The movement was so coordinated that it looked like a choreographed macabre dance. They do this with any disturbance, explained Caldwell. And at night it's worse. What happens at night? They say. I felt a chill through my spine. They talk? Not with words exactly. But they make sounds that seem to be distorted human voices. Screams, supplications, military orders. As if they were trying to communicate something. I decided I needed to enter the fort to investigate. Caldwell tried to dissuade me, saying that several men he had sent inside never completely returned healthy. But I was determined. I tied my horse and approached the gates. The crows watched me with their bright black eyes, spinning their heads at the impossible angles to follow me. When I crossed the gate, they walked away, creating a way for me, as if inviting me to enter. The interior of the fort was in perfect order except for the layer of bird droppings that covered everything. The weapons were still in the brackets, the uniforms hanging from the housing, the letters half written at the tables. It was as if time had stopped at the exact moment of the disappearance. In the commander's office, I found Captain Reynolds' diary. The latest entrances were routine patrol reports, supply inventories, heat complaints. But the last entrance, dated 3 days before the disappearance, caught my attention. The Apache scouts were seen again near the fort. One of them, an old shaman that men call the Corvais, was seen by performing some kind of ritual in the hills north. Lieutenant Morrison wanted to pursue them, but I ordered them to keep us district. The horses refused to get out of the stable after the sunset. Crow's Eyes. The name was familiar to me. During my years living among the Cherokee, he had heard stories about a powerful Apache shaman who had mad after losing his entire tribe in a massacre. They said he had made a pact with dark spirits, gaining the power to control the dead. As I reflected on this, I noticed that the crows had begun to cluster in the windows, watching me. Their grasses now had a different tone, urgent, almost desperate. I left the office and headed to the central courtyard. It was then that I saw something that made me stop abruptly. In the exact center of the courtyard, the crows had organized into a perfect circular pattern, leaving an empty space in the middle. And in this space, drawn with disturbing precision, was a symbol that I immediately recognized. It was an Apache symbol for transformation, specifically, the transformation of the soul after death. But there was something wrong with him. Some lines were altered, distorted, as if the ritual had been corrupted on purpose. Suddenly I understood what had happened. Corvais had performed a war ritual, a spell intended to torment the spirits of the dead soldiers, preventing them from finding peace. But something had gone wrong. Instead of affecting only the dead, the ritual had captured the living, turning their souls into crows as their bodies simply ceased to exist. The sun was setting, dyeing the sky with blood red. Caldwell had warned me about the night, and now I felt a growing urgency to leave the fort before dusk. But something had held me to a sense of responsibility. These men, arrested in the form of crows, needed to be released. When the last light of day disappeared, the crows began their sinister night transformation. Their grasses have changed, becoming more serious, more human. And then, to my horror, they started talking. "Help us!" Hundreds of distorted voices echoed in unison. "Free us!" "Who are you?" I shouted at the growing darkness. "We are, the garrison, arrested. He arrested us." Crow Eyes? A collective grass road that sounded like a cry of agony. "Yes, the shaman, ritual, wrong. How can I free them?" "Find, he who break, the scepter." Before they could say more, a sudden wind swept the courtyard. The crows raised a panic flight, their now purely animalistic screams. And then, in the main gate, I saw a figure that made my blood freezing. He was an old man, incredibly old, dressed in animal skins and bone adornments. His eyes were completely black, not just the iris, but the entire eyeball. In his hand, he held a staff adorned with crow's feathers and what seemed to be small human bones. "Sam Houston," he said, his voice sounding like the shaving of dry bones. "The man who lived among the Cherokee. You shouldn't have come." "Your Crow's Eyes," I said, my hand instinctively going to the pistol cable. He laughed, a sound that made the crows grasp in agony. "This name has no more meaning. I am something more now. Something beyond death." "What did you do to these men?" "I gave them immortality," he replied, gesturing to the crows now circulating upon us. "They wanted protection against my people. Now they are protected forever. Neither alive nor dead. Eternal. This is not immortality. It's torture. It's justice." His voice thundered, and the crows responded with deafening shouts. "They killed my family. My whole tribe. Children, women, elders, all massacred by soldiers like these." I then saw madness in his black eyes, not just hatred, but such a deep pain that he had consumed his humanity. This was no longer a shaman seeking revenge, but a creature consumed by his own darkness. "The revenge cycle needs to end," I said, trying to appeal to any fragment of sanity that still remains in it. "These men were not the ones who killed their tribe. Everyone is guilty." He shouted, raising the staff. "And you will join them." The staff began to shine with an unnatural black light. I felt a terrible pressure in my mind, as if invisible claws tried to tear my soul out of the body. The crows dived toward me, their sharp beaks seeking my eyes. Fighting the force I tried to overcome me, I pulled my pistol and shot. I didn't keep in the shaman. Something told me that conventional bullets would not affect him. Instead, I kept my staff. The bullet hit the target, shattering one of the skulls that adorned him. Crow's Eyes shouted in pain, and for a moment his concentration failed. I took the opportunity to throw me against him. We fight on the dusty floor of the courtyard, it with supernatural strength despite the apparent age, I with the despair of those who fight not only for their own lives, but by the souls of 80 men. The crows circled us, grasping frantically, not knowing if they should attack me or protect their transformed companions. During the fight, I grabbed the staff. The moment my fingers touched the old wood, I was flooded with terrible views: the massacre of Crow's Eyes tribe, its deal packed with dark entities, the gradual corruption of his soul, and finally the ritual that imprisoned the soldiers. I also saw how to break the spell. The staff was the receptacle of the power of the shaman and the anchor that kept the souls transformed. Destroying him would free the soldiers, but would also destroy what was left of Crow's Eyes. "No!" he shouted, realizing my intention. "Without the staff, I'd turn anything." "You have already become nothing," I said, feeling sorry for all. "Your revenge consumed your humanity. Let them go. Let yourself go." With all the strength I could gather, I broke the staff over my knee. The sound was like 1,000 glasses shattering simultaneously. A wave of energy exploded from the breakpoint, throwing us in opposite directions. Crow's Eyes shouted, not in pain, but of relief. I saw your black eyes clarify for a moment, revealing human brown underneath. "Thank you," he whispered before his body begins to dispose of dust, carried by the night wind. The crows, in turn, began an extraordinary transformation. One by one, they began to shine with silver light, their avian forms melting and renovating. In a matter of minutes, 80 men in army uniforms were standing in the courtyard, looking around with confusion and relief. Captain Reynolds was the first to recover from the shock. "Mr. Houston? What happened? Where were we?" "It's a long story, Captain," I said, still recovering my breath. "You have been trapped in a curse. But now you are free." He took hours to explain everything, first to the stunned soldiers, then Caldwell, who cried openly to see his returned men. Many soldiers had fragmented memories of their existence as crows, sensations to fly, see the world from above, to share a collective consciousness. In the following weeks, Fort Phantom was evaluated. The place was considered cursed, and frankly, I agreed with this assessment. Some places carry the weight of so much pain and hatred that it is best to leave them for oblivion. But the story did not completely end that night. In the following years, I received occasional reports from a single white crow seen near the abandoned Strom. Unlike the others, he never grasped, just watched travelers with eyes that looked strangely human. I like to think that it was Crow's Eye spirit, finally finding the peace that had denied himself in life. Or maybe it was just an ordinary albino bird. In the Old West, it is not always easy to distinguish between the natural and the supernatural. What I know for sure is this: revenge is a poison that destroys both the victim and the avenger. Crow's Eyes allowed his justified hatred to become something monstrous, imprisoning not only his enemies, but himself into an eternal cycle of suffering. Fort Phantom soldiers were victims not only of a spell, but of the weight of history, from the injustices committed, the spilled blood, the cycles of violence that marked the conquest of the West. Sometimes I wonder if we are all, in a way, imprisoned by the ghosts of the past, repeating the same mistakes in different forms. This is another story that has never entered the official records. The military report simply stated that the garrison had been temporarily unwell due to a mysterious disease and then relocated. The truth, as always, is stranger and more terrible than any fiction. Fort Phantom is still there, its ruined walls being slowly claimed by the desert. They say that in certain nights, when the wind blows the right way, you can still hear the grasner of invisible crows. I never came back to check. Some memories are too heavy to revisit. Keep this story as a reminder: in the Wild West, sometimes the greatest dangers do not come from bullets or arrows, but from the forces we ourselves arouse when we allow hatred to replace our humanity. And also remember that redemption, even for the most lost souls, can sometimes come from where we least expect it. Fort Phantom's crows taught me that. And now, through this story, I hope you have taught you too. Before we end this account, If you are visiting our channel for the first time, be sure to subscribe and activate the bell to receive notifications about our upcoming scary stories. Your support means a lot to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks.